Hey, we're reading from Mark 4 this morning, Mark 4:35. I don't know if you bring your Bibles, it'd be cool if you did. But we're going to read that. It says here, that day when the evening came, he said to the disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along, just as he was in the boat. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up and rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Be still." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. He said to the disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him." Hey, I don't know, I was just talking to Holly before. I didn't know she was from Cairns, and this story actually happened in Cairns when I was up there on holidays, just so you know. There was a zoo up there, and where we went to the zoo, and there was a lion enclosure, and there was a lion feeding happening in the afternoon. I don't know if you've ever been to Cairns, they have a zoo up there. And we were like, okay, well, let's go to the lion feeding. And it is the most incredible thing that you will ever witness. I'm not kidding, right? Probably everyone loves lions, right? You see my little sister, she's 6. She watches all the little lion cartoons. They have a high-pitched voice. They're very friendly. They don't eat people. And everyone loves the little cartoon lions, right? Everyone loves them. But this is completely different. That's not a real lion, okay? Those little cartoon lions. Like, if you ever witness a real lion face to face, it is just absolutely incredible. So we're at this enclosure, and the lions start down the other end of the enclosure, and they put meat all up the top of the enclosure, right in front of where you stand, right? So we're there, and we're standing right on the edge of this fence, and they let the lions out. And as they start running towards you, they start like roaring, right? And it's not like your little cat, right? Your little domestic cat, right? It is absolutely incredible. Like, you know, you go to the movies, and like sometimes at the start they have the lion that roars at the start. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Like, it's louder than that, and they are like ages away from you. Like, the pen's probably about 800 meters, and like it is just incredibly loud. And it's like a wind; it rushes straight through you. I'm not kidding. Like, it is the most incredible thing, and you won't know till you experience it. But when you do, I remember vividly as a kid thinking, "Holy heck! Like, these things are incredible." Like, and they're just so powerful and strong, and you're like, I'm in the presence of something so much greater than me. Like, and they're massive too. They're insanely big, almost as big as Peter Sue. So, they're just like absolutely incredible. These things, absolutely incredible. And see, in this story, Jesus takes the disciples out in the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is it's a small body of water. It's not a massive sea, but it's really quite unique. The way that the wind flows in, and the way that just the general vicinity of it, the waves crash in a certain way, right? So when you have a storm over the Sea of Galilee, they're not sharp, choppy storms like you see out on like the open ocean. They roll, and they do this big rolling pattern. So if you're ever caught in a storm on the Sea of Galilee, it's incredibly terrifying because you go up for a long time and then you go down for a really long time. And it is terrifying, right? See, because we often think that the sea is usually described like a raging sea or a roaring ocean, right? It can feel like this overwhelming, like that lion when I was standing in the presence of it. I'm like, I'm in the presence of something so much greater. And it's terrifying. It's genuinely terrifying. And that's why we describe sea in this way, because it's terrifying if you've ever been out in the open ocean and there's massive waves. Right? It's terrifying. You really get a grasp of like that you're just a human. You know? You're not this like big, buff thing that controls everything. You're no Arnold Schwarzenegger on the sea, right? You are just in the presence of something so much greater. And see, that's what the disciples thought, right? But they missed it. They completely missed the point. They thought that when they met the sea, that was to be feared. The sea was to be overcome by, overwhelmed by. That was what the sea was meant to do, but no. They completely missed it. And we are exactly like the disciples today. Exactly like them. We fear the created things and not the creator. We do. Think about the world where we go into school and we're just full of, and I know, I've been there. We are full of anxiety. We are full of worry. We really are. Like, anxiety is just a massive problem in our country. I mean, just about everyone gets anxious at times, but actual anxiety, oh my gosh, it's just such a prevalent issue. We walk into school, and I remember walking into school, I was a nervous wreck. I mean, I just have my head down all the time. I was so worried and concerned what people thought of me. Genuinely just so fearful. Or maybe it's not like anxiety, you're overwhelmed by family issues, just what people think of you, the standards that society places on you that you feel like you can never ever live up to. Or maybe you have a career or a dream and you go, there is no way I will ever get there. No way. And we're overwhelmed by it and it crushes you. It literally feels like this weight on your shoulders and you're overwhelmed by the world. And Jesus, it's going to sound harsh, but Jesus rebukes these people. He rebukes the disciples. He says, why? Why are you so fearful? Why is it that you don't trust me and you go after these things? Why is it that you're overwhelmed by the world, but you're not overwhelmed by me? See, the disciples completely missed it. See, what's incredible about, if you ever do, at my university, we do church history. And if you go back and you read about the church history literature, there are so many times when Christians are about to be killed or they're put into prison, and there's like songs of them worshipping. Or they're just at peace, or they die smiling with joy. And we're here like, what? I mean, by comparison, Australia, like statistics will tell you, Australia is the safest country in the world for women to live in. Okay? But we are so still filled with anxiety. Yet these Christians go to the cross, they go to like all through these horrible, horrible things, and yet they have peace. What? We shouldn't be people filled with anxiety. Living in Australia, let alone being the church of Jesus. We should be powerful people, filled with peace, filled with the Holy Spirit. But we're not. We're not. And that's the first thing we learn about Jesus. He is so much more powerful than these situations. See, if you go back and you read the Old Testament, Israel's scriptures, you see that, that's right, got my point back. You see that God rescues people from miraculous situations. Miraculous situations. I mean, he just turns like the wind and the waves, right? So the sea in Hebrew scriptures represents chaos and it represents evil, right? Something that you just can't control, something that's powerful and overwhelming. That's what the sea represents, right? I mean, just the situations that we go through that are just like horrific. This deep, deep suffering that we go through. Right? And that's what the sea represents. But Jesus is so much greater than that. And us as the church, we have something happen and we go, oh no, I can't believe in God. No, I can't believe in God. So what? Like, do you know God? Do you honestly know him? Like, he is so powerful. He's so much greater. Remember when I was talking about the roaring sea that the disciples faced, right? It's like a roaring lion. The disciples were overcome by the roaring lion of the sea, not the lion that is truly God. God is that lion that we should be overwhelmed by. God is that lion. He's referred to in the Old Testament as the Lion of Judah. He is so much more powerful, so much more greater. He is the lion that we should fear. He is the lion that we should be overwhelmed by. That's who Jesus is. But you see, Jesus in this, if you think that this story is just about overcoming situations or God being able to overcome situations, I'm sorry, but as much as that is in there, that's not the main point of why Jesus does this, right? if you ever heard of a parable, right? You might have heard that word thrown around in church. Parables point to the mystery of God. Okay, parables point to the mystery of God. They reveal who God is. Now, what's this? You might think this is not a parable. Well, actually it is. It's a parable of deed. God is actually doing something. Jesus is doing something to reveal his true identity. Okay? Have you ever heard of the book of Exodus? Old Testament, yeah? Israel scriptures, right? Now, have you ever heard of this? 77. Does anyone know what I mean when I say that? Put your hand up. A few leaders, yeah? Nah, Peter, you were just here, mate. You heard the story. Right, 77. I mean, we've got a few people here, but not many of us. Why? Because it's embedded in someone else's story, right? 77 relates to the speech that Abraham Lincoln gave, and it was just the most incredible speech, united a country. After that, there was just incredible victory, right? But we don't know that. Why? Because we're not American. We don't live in that story, right? We're Australians, okay? So, when we become Christians, right, we don't become how do I put it? We are the church, right? That's pretty obvious. But we're embedded into someone else's story. We're embedded into Israel's story, right? And just like if you told any American 77, yep, I know what that is, instantly. It's incredibly famous. You go to the Abraham Lincoln Memorial in Washington, big, huge, it's massive. It's a speech about his 77 speech. Incredible, changed the nation. If you told a Jew, Exodus, yep, know what that is. Why? Because that's their story. That's the story of the people. And we're not separate from that. We are embedded into that story. We are the new Israel. We carry out what Israel does, right? So what's God trying to say to us? Well, if we look back at Exodus, right, there's a story of when the Israelites were in slavery to the Egyptians, right? Pharaoh kept them in slavery. And God, Yahweh, which is like the Hebrew term for God, right, rescues them, okay? And what's amazing about this story is this. I mean, this just points to how good God is, and we just can't even see it. So often we go through situations like, God, how could you bring good out of this? And this is incredible, right? The Exodus story, okay, is the perfect example. I mean, God just makes a way, right? The people Pharaoh releases Israel from their slavery. So they start traveling, right? They get to this sea, right? You know, the Dead Sea, Red Sea? Dead Sea. Yeah, I can't remember. One of those. And anyway, so they get to this sea, right? And they get stuck, right? They can't go behind them because who's behind them? Pharaoh's army, right? They can't go left because who's there? Well, there's a military camp and they'll get slaughtered too. Keep in mind that Israelites do not have an army here. They're completely outnumbered, right? They can't go right because there's a mountain range, okay? And you can't take thousands of people up a mountain range. And there's a sea in front of them. There's a sea. So what does Yahweh do? Yahweh saves his people when there is absolutely no way that they could do anything about it. The people of Israel cannot save themselves. They can't. Not in this situation. There is absolutely no way that they can save themselves. And Yahweh makes a way. He splits the sea. So then we go to the New Testament. Where else have we seen someone tame and control the seas? Exodus. Yahweh, God, controlled the seas. He did. He has power over the water. So what's Jesus trying to say to us now? I'm Yahweh. That Exodus that you guys read so often, I'm that God. Right? I saved your people before, your forefathers, I saved them, and I controlled the wind and the waves, and I'm doing it again. Right? The disciples have no hope of getting out of the situation. Right? Wind and waves, terrifying. And he said, why are you fearful of the seas? I am Yahweh. He's trying to heal their view of God. Right? See, the disciples get it wrong. What do they call Jesus? Do you remember earlier in the story? What's the name they give him? Rabbi. What does that mean? Teacher. So you might hear some atheists just say, or even just your average everyday Australian, oh no, Jesus wasn't God, he was just a good teacher. No, you missed it. He is not a good teacher. And he's not just a person. He is Yahweh. He is God. I saved your people before, I will save your people again. And we do it all the time. We do in Australia. We tell God who he is and who he isn't, right? This is Australian or Western spirituality even is this, right? It's just imagine like a shopping center. We walk down the shopping center, we pick items and goods off that we like about God, and the parts that we don't like about God, we leave there. I don't like a God who's a judge, who judges people. Well, I don't like a God who takes war or vengeance or whatever it is. And we do this all the time, and we tell God who he is. We do. We see God in light of our experience and not who he is in the scriptures. We're exactly like the disciples. Disciples read the scriptures all the time, but they were blind. They were blind. They couldn't see God when he really showed up. And so are we. We do it all the time. You know, if you take, our fathers aren't perfect. We love them, but they're not perfect, right? So when we see our fathers do something that's hurtful, that's harmful, what do? We reflect that image onto God. When we have a friend that lets us down, we have a friend that manipulates or doesn't let us in, right? We've all had friends that have hurt us. What do? We put that image onto God. We tell God who he is, and he gets frustrated by it. Imagine if someone came up to you and told you, hey, Ethan, you're not really Ethan, you're Sam. He's looking around like, are you kidding me? Like, are you for real? Like, and then God, you wonder why God, see, we think that Jesus rebuked the disciples because they didn't believe that he had the power to control the wind and the waves. No, he didn't rebuke the disciples for that reason. He rebuked the disciples because they told him who he was, a good teacher. And God says to us, let me tell you who I say that I am, and I'll tell you who you are. That's what we've got to be as Christians. And it would change everything about our lives. If we read scripture and we actually said, no, God, I'm going to submit to this, and I'm going to let you tell me about your word. I'm not going to try to interpret it. You're going to tell me about it. That's the Christian walk. That's it. We need to have God reveal himself to us and heal our blindness and heal us. It happens in situations when we throw in the towel. We go through something tough, and what happens? God's not faithful. God's not good. He's not there. We sing it. You know, we just sung that song. I forgot the lyrics now. Anyway. But those lyrics describe characteristics of God, and when times get tough, we throw it out the window. Say, God is not that. God is not close. God does not hear me. It's like, what? And God gets frustrated and he says, no, let me tell you who I say I am. That's the Christian walk, and that's why he rebukes the disciples. And we need to turn and we need to say, I'm so sorry, God. I told you who you were. God is unchanging. He will never, ever change. He is always loving. He is always true, always faithful, always. So we think, but man, we come to just situations of suffering, and we think, how on earth can God bring such good out of the situation? How can he possibly good when I'm going through such tough and difficult times? And it's the cross. The cross is a perfect example of when suffering, the greatest amount of suffering and the greatest amount of good occurs. The cross. And you think about it, there's a picture, right, in the ancient world, when Jesus, in the first century, And it's this picture of a man splayed out on a cross with a donkey's head. Do you know who that was? Jesus. They mocked him. The whole entire world mocked Jesus for dying on a cross. The cross was such a disgusting and a horrific thing that it wasn't even mentioned in polite conversation. We have basically no records of the cross. No records. Because it was such a horrifying and disgusting thing. Yet we come here every Sunday and we see a God bleeding and dying on a cross, and that is the message of our hope. The message of our hope is a cross, suffering. A God who came and demonstrated that he is faithful all the time, and you need to hear it. That I am always faithful, and no matter how bad things get, I am still good. I am still good. You got to remember, when we come to this cross and we look at this cross and we look at this picture of suffering, that is our hope. That no matter how much I suffer, I still have that hope. That's his grace. The thing about the both stories that's incredible is this. Same with Exodus, the same with the story with the disciples. They had no way out. They could not save themselves. And Jesus came. Why? He died on a cross because you couldn't save yourself. You couldn't heal yourself, and you need intervention. You need God to come and intervene and remind you he is faithful. I tell you what, when you stand in the presence of a lion, like a real lion, it is incredible, and his presence is amazing, but you will never know it until you experience it for yourself. Never. And that's exactly the same with his grace and the cross. You will never know it. It'll never change you until you experience it for yourself. You need healing of your view of God. You really do. We all do. Hey, we're gonna welcome the band back up, and as we're gonna sing, just say, God, show me who you really are. Like, really show me who you really are. I want to know. And it will rock your world. It'll just completely change you. It is just incredible. That cross is so beautiful. It is so just incredible.